don't think you have to eliminate the filibuster. You have to do it what it used to be when I first got to the Senate, and that is that a filibuster, you had to stand up and command the floor. Once you stopped talking, you lost that, and someone could move in and say, I moved the question of. So you got to work for the filibuster.
That clip was actually bigger than it sounded. For the first time, President Joe Biden, a 36-year Senate veteran and institutionalist, suggested he'd be okay altering the filibuster and requiring an active talking filibuster instead, like the kind Jimmy Stewart made iconic in the 1939 classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Democrats have been talking about it since their wins in Georgia in January, trying to make the most of their new majority in the Senate. But two Democratic senators, West Virginia's Joe Manchin and Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema, they've been resisting that push. So is Mitch McConnell, who promised to delay the Democratic agenda even more if they break the filibuster, comparing what he would do to the Senate to a 100-car pileup. Let's tap into our inner schoolhouse rocks for a quick reminder of what the filibuster is. It's a rule that requires 60 senators to agree just to get a final vote on any bill on any subject, even if that bill only needs 51 votes to pass its final vote. And right now, a senator can launch a filibuster just by saying so without doing anything else. Getting rid of the filibuster would lower that barrier to 51 votes, or even 50 votes and a vote from the vice president, which would work nicely for Democrats, because they control exactly 50 seats in the current Senate and the vice presidency. So getting rid of the filibuster would make it a lot easier to enact more of the Biden agenda, but would also make it easier for Republicans to do the same next time they control the chamber. But considering not a single Republican voted for the stimulus bill, which even Republican voters support, is messing with the filibuster the only move Democrats have left? For that, we turn to James Downie. James is the Washington Post's digital opinions editor. James, in your piece earlier this week, you noted that Democrats have Republicans on the back foot right now, and you urge Democrats to keep pursuing their agenda. I cannot repeat enough how big an obstacle the filibuster is to that effort, though we have tried on this program. So I wanted to ask you, explain to our viewers what Democrats can get done without the filibuster versus what they're likely to get passed if the filibuster remains.
Well, the one list is quite a bit shorter than the other. The Democrats certainly would like to try and pass an infrastructure package with reconciliation. Senator Cardin of Maryland was caught off on a hot mic saying that he expects basically that they would. They'll be using the budget reconciliation process, which they used to pass the recent stimulus package, to also pass an infrastructure package. But other than that, anything else is pretty much off the table until the filibuster is significantly reformed.
Considering there were no Republican votes on the stimulus, not even clear if anything can get passed with bipartisan cooperation. President Biden, as a longtime senator, is considered one of the ultimate Senate institutionalists, and he was on record not wanting to axe the filibuster, but that take changed while he was speaking with ABC. It seems like there's a small split within the Democratic Party on the issue. So how will Biden's change of tune impact Democratic senators, particularly Senators Manchin and Sinema, who have opposed changing the filibuster?
I think it certainly can't be underestimated, the importance of Biden coming out, the president coming out, the leader of his party, to say that the filibuster needs to be changed. He, on the other hand, is not calling for the biggest of changes. It's calling for a return of the filibuster to the talking filibuster that was in place when Biden was first a senator back in the 1970s. But of course, the pressure on Senators Manchin and Sinema from even the sort of the liberal part of the party, let alone the far left of the party, has been intense, and it will only increase with the president coming out in favor of some sort of reform. So that will make it even more difficult for them to continue to stand in the way of some sort of change. However, in some ways, Manchin is already ahead of the president on this, in that he has signaled openness. He said that it should be more painful, I believe, were his words, for the minority party to filibuster.
One more filibuster question and then I'll move on. Republican Senate Leader Mitch McConnell promised every possible delay and other obstructions if Democrats move on the filibuster, which is interesting because I thought Republican obstruction was the reason Democrats were considering getting rid of the filibuster in the first place. What do you make of McConnell's threats, or of their all but guaranteed vengeance if and when the GOP gets back in the majority?
I think the proper reaction is the same reaction that Senator Durbin of Illinois had, which is, so how will things change? Senator McConnell has already become the ultimate obstructionist. It was under him that under him that Senate Republicans stymied President Obama again and again successfully. That really turned as much as the filibuster had been increasing in usage before the Obama years, McConnell turned it into a almost all the time filibuster, all the time approach. So McConnell's just sort of, he can make all the threats he wants, but he's already acting this way. It's not really clear what exactly will change.
So you're urging Democrats to continue pursuing their agenda, and there's already a logjam in Congress about what could come next or should come next. There are bills that have already made it through the House, including the For the People Act with lots of election protections and voting protections, the Equality Act, which prohibits discrimination. You still have the $15 minimum wage out there, immigration reform and the Dreamers, infrastructure. Which would you prioritize, and which of those have potential dangers for Democrats?
I think I would, because they've already passed the House, I would prioritize the For the People Act, the HR 1. It certainly, in terms of the differences it can make with elections across the board. I mean, elections are, exercising political power. You need to have seats to do that, and we've seen with Republicans a number of measures either in process or already having been passed to restrict the vote, suppress the vote, to make it harder for particularly Democratic-leaning groups to turn out. So that would certainly be top of mind, especially considering that it's already passed the House. After that, I think it's mostly looking at what is popular with voters. What do voters want? And I think infrastructure would certainly be on that list. I think a $15 minimum wage would certainly be on that list. It's been a very curious thing where you're seeing in the Senate, a number, you mentioned Senators Manchin and Sinema. They've been very reluctant on a $15 minimum wage, even though voters from their own voters are actually in favor of it, according to polls. Again, and by significant margins, not just by all the Democrats in West Virginia are for it and all the Republicans are against it. I mean, we're talking 60-40 margins, which in this day and age is quite significant. So those would be sort of others that I would consider important. And obviously, immigration is both important because of what's happening at the border and also because of, it's important to key activist groups in the Democratic Party.
You also wrote about ways that Democrats could pursue raising revenue. You talked about considering the wealth tax, raising top-end tax rates, even IRS crackdowns to for people who are deadbeats or still owe money to the IRS. All of that is aimed primarily at top earners, but easy enough to spin that as tax hikes. Where should the balance be between producing results that the Democratic base is happy with while protecting the party against attacks that they're leading the nation to socialism?
Let's back up. The Republicans will attack any Democratic proposal as trying to return to socialism, regardless of how moderate it is. We saw this with, for example, the Affordable Care Act was a march to socialism. The Obama stimulus was a march to socialism. The Biden stimulus is a march to socialism. So that attack is going to come regardless. What Democrats, the best way to protect against that with Democrats, or the best way to deal with those attacks is to focus on things that are popular with voters. And again, all three proposals that I mentioned that you quoted, wealth tax, the raising the top rate back from raising the top rate, and letting the IRS crack down on tax dodgers. These are all incredibly popular proposals. We're talking 70% of voters are in favor of them. So again, you're still going to, it's when you get into, say, something like raising taxes on people making $100,000 or above. That's where you start to run into issues, and that's where you start to, that's where it becomes politically more treacherous for Democrats. But I think as long as you're sticking to these proposals, you will. Again, Republicans will make their attacks, but they're not going to meet with the approval of most voters, including independents and persuadables.
Finally, James, based on your other answers, I think I know how you're going to answer this, but what do you think is the bigger fear for the midterms for the Democrats? That they're seen as going too far, or that they haven't gone far enough and left their base disappointed?
I think it's absolutely the former. I think also, though, that you look at what someone like in Barack Obama, if you go back to his memoir, which was released late last year, he continually laments, as much as he at points criticizes activists in the party who said he didn't go far enough. At other points, particularly in regards, at other points he does admit, he's very open about saying, I wish I had told Harry Reid from the beginning to get rid of the filibuster. They recognize, I think Democrats recognize that their fears about going too far after the Great Depression ended up hamstringing them. It ended up hurting them in the long run. So I think that, again, people are going to reward you for doing too much rather than too little. And I think we're going to see that play out as it is in the fall.
James Downie, opinion columnist with the Washington Post. James, appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up, we'll get all the skinny on this from ABC News political director Rick Klein. But first, we head to Minneapolis for an update on jury selection in the case of the police officer accused of killing George Floyd. Then an attorney will weigh in on the jury process and more.